This was the university project I was supposed to do. Just a simple checklist, a bunch of tasks to learn the basics of the Unity engine. And at first I was like, alright, I'll just follow the steps, get it done, and for the love of God, keep it simple. Yeah, that's not what happened. Because the truth is, guys, I've spent the last few years studying engineering, juggling a part-time job, and grinding through courses that felt that they were leading me everywhere except where I actually wanted to go. I didn't get into engineering because I wanted to do math or solve heat transfer equations at 3 a.m. That's kind of the same thing.
Feel bad. Good. Fuck you.
I got into it because I wanted to make games. Games that make you want to leave reality for a couple minutes and forget all your problems. Games I'd actually play. This was my dream since I was a kid and I felt trapped. So when this assignment showed up, this boring little list of Unity exercises, something in me just snapped. I wanted to prove something, not just to my professor, not even to anyone else. I wanted to prove to myself I could still do this. That I hadn't lost that spark, that thing that got me in here in the first place. So instead of doing an easy project, I did this. Because apparently what I really needed in the middle of midterms and sleep deprivation was to build a parkour shooter with wall running, sliding, and physics that barely worked. And it all started with a simple movement system. So I open up Unity, completely forgetting that URP is a way better rendering pipeline for literally everything. But hey, I'm sure this won't cause any major issues down the line. Anyway, back to the plan. So I did what any totally reasonable solo developer would do. I look at what AAA games do, because obviously that's a fair comparison. Now, let's talk about how I actually built the movement system. And don't worry, I'll keep it brief. I used something called a finite state machine, or FSM to its friends. The power of this programming pattern is that we divide our whole system, in our case our movement system, into different little states. Think of states as boxes. They represent what the player is doing at a given time. It could be walking, jumping, sliding, or wall running. And now imagine arrows between them. Those are what we call transitions. They decide when and why the player switches from one state to another. FSMs are great because they allow us to organize our behavior. With that one, our code can quickly turn into a giant ball of if statements and what we called spaghetti code. And I'm not saying it can't work. I mean, I'm pretty sure Celeste has a legendary 1,000-line movement script. But for this project, we want something scalable. We want to be able to add movement or tweak it on the fly without breaking the whole system every time. With our FSM set up and our player actually being able to exist in different states like walking or jumping or sprinting, I know I'm being very creative with this, but the next logical step was to add more states, like for example, sliding, because for some reason this mechanic has infected every shooter on the market, and you can't release an FPS these days unless the player can launch themselves across the map like somebody spelled Vaseline everywhere. Jesus, it's even in Battlefield now. Jokes aside, this mechanic would be great for a movement system, and it's really easy to implement. We'll just slap some force on the player's rigid body and scale them down to the size of a small gremlin. And let's pretend that our animations aren't a real thing for now. Boom. Done. Kinda. And I may or may not had to threaten our player's rigid body, but hey! Now it feels great and fun, so that's a win in my book. I also took the liberty of adding a dash system, and it will give the player a more dynamic way of traversing the environment once we have an environment. With that handled, I figured, you know what this needs? Wall running. Because when you hate working with math and vectors make your head hurt trying to understand them, clearly the best move is to add a mechanic that's 90% math and 10% wishing that our player sticks to the wall.
I will not know the full extent of your brain function until we establish a neural link.
Yes, like that, but worse. Because my college project was not chaotic enough. So, I did what any experienced dev would do. And after a lot of research and a lot of failed attempts, how do we actually make wall running work? Well, like all great things in game development, the secret is just lying. In this case, to the physics engine. First, we need to check if we actually have a wall to do a wall run. We use physics.raycast to shoot invisible beams out of the size of the player.
But wait, how do we differentiate a runnable wall from, let's say, a lamppost or a trash can?
I hear you asking. And the answer is layer mask. Why? Because I'm lazy, and this was just quicker than creating a dynamic way to detect runnable walls. With a layer mask, we separate our game objects into, well, layers, and then we mask them. I know, very hard concepts that we're dealing with here. But hey, here's the cool thing. This acts as a filter. With this, we can check if our rays are actually hitting walls or anything that we want. Think of it like a group ID for our objects. So the idea is we're constantly asking the game, hey, is this a wall or is this a wall? If the object says, yes, I am part of the wall layer, then we can start wall running. And this is where the lying begins. We start by telling the rigid body to shut up, and then we apply force that pushes our player into the wall so we can have that stickiness feeling. Then we do some vector cross math product thing to figure out which way is forward along the wall surface, and then we just push the player that way. And after a few touches of the camera, there, you're just running. Looks way more complex, but on the hood it's just math. Sadly for me. Now that the movement felt mostly right, the game needed something else. A personality. And here's where the UI comes in. The UI isn't just the information on the menus that the player needs to know. In some cases, to an extreme extent. Okay, and maybe sometimes it's talking way too much. But when it's done right, the UI becomes the voice of the game. It's how the game talks to the player without saying a word. Take a game like Dishonored. Even though the game's tutorials works wonders in explaining how the game is played, it also makes you feel the grime of Dawnwall. The fonts are jagged and worn, the icons look hand-etched, the color scheme is muted and oily, just as the blood of the whales that they use for energy. And that's the thing. The UI reinforces the world. Without saying a thing, the game is telling us this place is diseased, broken, dangerous. So, what does our game UI study? Well, right now, nothing, because it doesn't exist. So I downloaded Figma, worked with what you know, right? And started designing the main menu. But I hit a wall immediately. Identity. I mean, sure, I had to add buttons, sliders, but what was the game about? Right now, it was just about a beam jumping through cubes. But then it hit me. Almost every movement shooter, or game that relies on parkour, is fundamentally about freedom. Freedom of movement, freedom from physics, and usually, freedom from oppression. Think about it. Templars versus Assassins, the Conglomerate versus the Runners, Rise versus the Tower. It's a motif that we've seen 1,000 times, but that's because it works. These games are linking their mechanics to their story. You run because you have to. You run because they can't catch you. And this brings us to the name. Originally, State Shift was just a dumb engineering pun. You know, finite state machine, shifting through states. I'm an engineering student, okay? I don't do creative. But looking at it through this lens, it became about something else. It became the story of a scrappy, dirty revolution fighting against a perfect state. A clean, dictatorial regime that has eyes and ears everywhere. And our regime like that needs a face. So we created the Lioness.
You look lonely. I can fix that.
She's the head of this surveillance state. someone who was burned so badly by society that decided to stop trusting people. And started trusting the cold binary certainty of machines. She is the order, and we are the chaos. And now that you have met our villain, we need a world for her to control. But that's a massive problem for another day, because a story is never about how ambitious your concept is. It's all about execution. But we'll talk about this next time. With our identity better defined, I started mocking up some of the UI. And then came the pause menu, where, let's say, I subtly transform existing assets. Legally, I think. I'll change it later. Probably. Okay, stop the recording! Anyway, legally distinct UI crisis aside, we took the game from this to this. But we were still missing something. I mean, sure, we have movement, we have a UI that's pretty cool looking if I do say so myself, but the movement felt stale, which is a huge problem when your whole idea for your game is built around movement. Hell, movement shooter is half the name of the genre, so how do we make the player feel fast? Well, I turned to the all gods of speed, the classic Need for Speed games. If you ever played Most Wanted 2005, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, picture this. You're behind the wheel of the BMW M3 GTR, a legendary car, the blue and silver pist. 5 cop cars breathing down your neck, tire spikes ahead, a helicopter overhead. And what's your plan? Go faster. The engine screams, the FOV stretches, and the whole screen shakes like it's barely holding together. And suddenly, it feels like you're about to break the sound barrier. But here's the incredible part. You were not actually going that fast. The game is just really good at gaslighting you into thinking you were. Now, let's compare this to the newer entries on the franchise. They should feel way better, right?
This has a plan B.
Oh, and the plan C.
Same top speed, or probably even faster. Better looking cars, bigger worlds, but somehow it just doesn't hit the same. You just don't feel like you're barely controlling a beast in an epic chase, right? It feels like a smooth overdrive. Sure, the graphics are better, but not the emotions the game gives you. And that's the thing. It's not about how fast you were actually going, it's how fast the game makes you feel you were. So I took that lesson to heart and started lying to the player in the most respectful way possible, okay? First up, FOV stretching. When the player starts hitting at high speed, we slowly start cranking up the camera's field of view. So everything feels like it's zooming outwards. It's a super simple trick that instantly makes you feel like you're going faster, even if you're technically jogging at a medium speed. Then I added some UI speed lines, little visual streaks on the screen that ramp up based actually on the player's speed. So now when you start moving faster, you start to feel it a bit more. And that's the cool thing. None of this actually changes the movement speed. It actually feels fast, but like I said before, illusion beats reality. And for the first time since I started to mess with this project, this game actually feels good. Not perfect, not finished, not even close to that. But there's this moment when you're sprinting down a hallway, grappling into a wall, and getting into a wall run, jumping off midair, dashing, and just barely landing into a cliff, where everything just clicks. And suddenly, it wasn't just a shooting project anymore. It actually feels like an actual game, like something I'd play, like something I'd like other people to play. Honestly, that feeling, it made all the late nights, bug hunts, and design meltdowns kind of worth it. So yeah, I don't know if I'll actually be able to pull this off. There's still a ton left to do. Bugs to fix, systems to build, UI to design, legally this time. And probably thousands of other things that I haven't even thought of yet. But I'm gonna keep going because honestly, this is the most fun I had making something in years. And who knows, maybe someday you'll see it on Steam. And if you got this far into the video, thank you. You might consider subscribing. Or don't, but please do. My sanity kinda depends on this. Either way, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.